Thank you all for having us on your screens and TV sets on yet another fresh edition of your favorite health program, You're in Your Health, aired on Equinoxe Radio Multimedia. I'm your host, Immaculate Fogwe. Today, we'll be looking at mental health. Mental health is a serious health concern in Cameroon, and we have several people who are struggling enormously to cope. From financial stress, work stress, and other challenges, people have found themselves in situations where they get depressed. But then the question is, how do we get out of such a dark phase? That's what we are going to be looking at in today's edition of the program, You and Your Health. And to answer my questions on this topic, we'll be having as guest a mental health nurse. She works at the Arm Medical Center in Bonaberi, and she's equally the founder of the Association on Mental Health, that is the core of humanity, mental health. Good day. It's a pleasure having you, BERINYUY, Irene, UWAIFO, in today's edition of the program.
Thank you so much, Immaculate, for having me here. It's always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Today we are looking at mental health, and it's coming at a time when a good chunk of Cameroonians seem to have been overwhelmed with different challenges of all sorts, and it's been having a great impact on how their mental health. Let's look at overall. What's mental health all about, and is there a need to be worried about mental health?
Okay. Thank you once more, Immaculate, for this question. Before I delve into the answer, I would like to wish you and other women, including myself, a happy International Women's Day. You know, we are still in the season, right? Mm-hmm. Happy Women's Day in arrears, International Women's Day in arrears. Okay, I'm going to answer this question. What is mental health? Mental health, in the simplest form, is when an individual, it is how an individual thinks, feels, or behaves. Basically, mental health, it's the psychological, the social, and the emotional well-being of an individual. If that individual is able to cope with normal stress of life, if that individual is able to work productively, if that individual is able to, have a normal relationship with others, if that individual is able to make a contribution to their community. I would like our viewers to equally understand what mental health illnesses are, because that's basically the opposite of good mental health. Okay. Mental health illnesses are basically a wide range of conditions that affect an individual's mood, thinking, and behavior. Now, poor mental health, what does it signify? The examples of poor mental health are depression, anxiety, societal instability, trauma, substance abuse. And now, why are we concerned about mental health, or why should we be concerned about mental health? Let's look at it this way. For example, family dynamics, right? Yeah. In a family, if people are suffering from poor mental health, there will be escalations. It could lead to escalations of conflict, tensions, emotional dysregulation, aggression, or even violence. Let's look at it on the level of physical health. Most of the time, people focus on their physical health. When you have malaria, you have typhoid, you rush off to the hospitals to get diagnosed and treated. But look at it this way. If an individual is suffering from, let's say, hypertension, mental health, and if the person now is going through some poor mental health, right, it's going to worsen the person's situation. Let me give this scenario of someone who is hypertensive, and the person goes to a skyscraper for maybe a program, and the person gets into an elevator, and whilst in the elevator, maybe midway the person gets stuck or trapped in the elevator. Imagine someone who is hypertensive at that point. What is going to happen? The person may develop panic attacks. The person could start to hyperventilate because it's claustrophobic, right? Yeah. The person may start to feel tightening of the chest, and it's going to worsen the situation of the person's state of being hypertensive. And also look at the issue of the aspect of productivity. If maybe a worker, say, is incapable, if a worker is going through some mental health challenge per se, the worker may not be very, very effective, as the productivity is going to be on the decline. Let me give another scenario of a teacher. Maybe she teaches secondary students in school, and this teacher is suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, and she comes to class one day unlike herself, she just, she loses it. She starts to, behave erratically. She starts to, maybe she starts to punish the students. She implements corporal punishment and stuff like that. So it's going to, her productivity is going to diminish because she's not efficient at that point. So that's one of the reasons why we should be concerned about mental health. And also look at it from a community level. If there are people or mentally ill persons in the community and these persons are not, first of all, the illnesses are not diagnosed or treated, it could escalate to maybe high crime wave in the community. It could lead to tension, societal issues, aggression, violence, and others. So that's why mental health, we should be concerned about mental health, because mental health per se, it's not just mental health issues per se. It's not just talking about medical conditions, but it's a national issue. It's a societal issue. It's a developmental issue as well.
So does it mean when someone becomes so aggressive, it automatically boils down to the fact that that person's mental health has been affected?
Not really, because it could be a combination of different factors. If someone becomes aggressive, it could be as a result of, mental health. First of all, there are three major influences of mental health. You have genetics, which is biological. You have life stress. You have environmental. So if the vulnerability traits of a particular mental health illness is present per se, the person, yes, could exhibit such tendencies. But then there are other factors that could combine, like societal factors, like life stress. Maybe the person is living in an environment which is not supportive. You understand? So that is it.
Statistically, why is Cameroon in terms of mental health? What's the level?
Oh, Cameroon. How can I put this? Cameroon is developing, but it is really under-resourced. Like Cameroon, statistically at this level, like looking at the total disease burden in Cameroon, the mental health illnesses, right, stands at about 6, according to statistics, about 6.1% of mental health illnesses make up the total health illness burden of diseases in Cameroon. And Cameroon lacks a lot of professionals. Like, we do not have there's a shortage of professionals like psychiatrists. If you want to look at it ratio-wise, the number of psychiatrists which should be allocated to a particular group of people is really, the disparity is much. And also we have there's some mental health facilities which are found in major cities like Douala, like Yaoundé, but in rural areas we have limited access to mental health facilities. If you want to look at it specifically, the prevalence of depression, for example, amongst certain groups like women, like teenagers, like people suffering from chronic ailments, the prevalence of depression is in between 8% to about 18%. So it's on the rise, statistically. And there are other challenges like, stigma, like cultural beliefs. Most people, even in this our contemporary age, here in Cameroon, they do not believe, they think that mental health illnesses are caused by witchcraft. They are caused by curses from maybe family people. They have such misconceptions. And also there is low funding statistically in Cameroon. I think it's about 2%, according to statistics, low funding concerning the mental health policy.
In the West, countries in the West, it's very common to see someone saying, I'm going to go and meet a mental health expert or a psychiatrist to get myself examined on some particular issues. But in Cameroon, due to some financial challenges, which is even one of the reasons that causes people to become depressed, that we don't have that tradition to go and visit an expert to get expert's view about our situation. With such a context, do you think it's easy to take control of our mental health?
It is very, very, it is advisable, to seek professional help, because most of the time we sideline, like I already mentioned, we are focused mostly on our physical health. When you have malaria, typhoid fever, you rush to the hospital. But when it comes to mental health, it is just like a silent phenomenon, because there is a low awareness being spread about mental health. So it is very, very important to talk to someone about whatever you're going through. If you do not even have the means, you have other
family members.
You have faith-based organizations, you have civil society organizations. Some of these organizations, they offer free services, right? So it's always very necessary to go.
According to recent statistics, we have about 213 women that have been killed since the year 2023 till present.
Okay.
Cases of femicide are on the rise. We are even having another case on the 8th of March, which was the International Women's Day. A man was killed by the wife. All of these cases seem to be the new trend. Is it in any way connected to mental health?
Okay. Thank you so much, Immaculate, for this question. Before I would talk about the correlation between mental health and this violent acts, femicide and homicide, I would like our viewers to understand what femicide and homicide, first of all, is. Femicide is the intentional killing of a woman or a girl, mostly caused due to gender-based violence, jealousy, discrimination, and others. And homicide is the killing of one person by another person. And femicide is homicide, but homicide is not particularly femicide. Now, if you want to look at the correlation, the relationship or the link between these violent acts and mental health issues, I would like to say here that mental health issues or mental health illness is not the only cause, of these violent acts, femicide and homicide. It's a combination of other factors like psychological factors, like social factors, like relational factors, like environmental factors. Let's take a look at psychological factors. You have when you see someone who is so possessive, you have some people who are obsessive. They want to control maybe their partners or whoever they are with. You have some people who have untreated personality disorders, like for example narcissistic disorders.
Yes.
According to I call it our Bible, the DSM, Diagnostic Statistical Manual, the 5th edition. We have narcissistic disorder, which falls under the cluster B. There you have traits such as manipulative traits. It's not all the time, but you have such people. They have manipulative traits. They are unable to cope with criticism. They have this grandiose, their ego is inflated. Yes. And when they feel threatened, right, in one way or the other, some of them may become violent. So this category of persons too, they fall under the psychological factors of untreated personality disorders. Now we have before I go to social factors, if most of the time we ignore the red flags of psychological factors. For example, you will hear a perpetrator say, I own her, she belongs to me.
Yeah.
If she's not with me, no other person can have her.
Exactly.
So those are red flags which we ignore, but they are there. Sadly, most of the victims are unable to speak for themselves because they are killed. So we have social factors as gender inequality, toxic masculinity. You have relational factors such as domestic violence, emotional violence, separation, divorce, and stuff like that. So I would like to reiterate that these violent acts of femicide and homicide are not mental health issues, are not the only reason why this violent acts take place. Okay. Other factors, there's a combination of other factors.
For those who like to participate in today's edition of the program, here are the numbers: 670-5470-49. I repeat, 670-5470-49 or 656-622222. 656-6222. Back to you, nurse. There is this common belief in Cameroon that people should avoid marrying into families with a history of violence. Is mental health genetic, and should people be worried about such family histories?
Okay, thank you so much, Immaculate, for this question. I will start with the aspect of is mental health genetics. Yeah, like I mentioned already, mental health has three major influences: genetics, which is biological, life stress, and also environmental factors. So mental health, the genetic traits could include disorders like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, severe depression. And I would like to reiterate here that these traits, these vulnerability traits, may not necessarily mean the individual or the client or the patient will develop such mental illness. Why? Because if they are living in a supportive environment, they will not develop such. Let me give an example. Take the instance of a student who has vulnerability traits of learning disability. Could be dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia,
Yes.
and this student is in an environment which is supportive. How do I mean? The parents, the caregivers, the guardians, and also they collaborate. It's a collective responsibility, right? They collaborate with the teacher of the student. They collaborate with the IEP instructors, that's individualized educational plan instructor. And when there is that collaboration, they adopt strategies that they will use to help.
We have a call on the line. We'll come back to that question. Hello?
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Your name, where you're calling from, and your question.
I'm just
Okay.
calling from Bonadil.
Okay, go ahead, sir. Okay, we lost that caller. We're talking about mental health and genetics. Any correlation?
Yes. So I was given a scenario or the example of a
Dyslexia.
student, who is suffering from a who has the traits or the genes of learning disabilities. And if that student is placed in a supportive environment, that student will not necessarily develop the challenge or the disability. So now, looking at the violent behavior per se, it is not purely genetics, right? It is it is acquired, it is learned behavior, as in most of our ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, that many children who turn out to be bullies, it is what they witnessed whilst they were growing up. For example, a child growing up in an environment where the parents have turned their home into a WWE wrestling arena, that child will evidently normalize aggression, and the child would would replicate such traits in their adulthood. So it is not necessary. Violent behavior is not necessarily genetic.
Okay.
Yes. And also you mentioned, should families be wary of getting involved with people who are coming from a violent background? Yes, they should take that into consideration, but that shouldn't be a limit. Yes, a limit. It shouldn't cause discrimination or some kind of biased judgment pertaining to the person. If there are other factors which are very important, if the person is of good character, if the person is willing to seek for help, if the person is one who is emotionally mature, you overlook certain things. Yeah.
Recently, we equally have another case of a woman who decides to kill herself, kill her 3 children. She poisoned their food, and according to her, while she was trying to carry out this act, her husband has abandoned her. He's not taking care of her needs, and he's equally not planning to get married to her. He's planning to get married to another woman. What psychological or medical explanation can better explain such a situation?
Okay, this was a very, very tragic case of extreme psychological distress, right? There are possible psychological reasons or causes to why this lady had to. This is felicide suicide, right? So one of the possible psychological reasons could be because of severe depression. She may have, when a person or an individual is facing severe depression, the person has feelings of worthlessness, hopelessness, emotional collapse. Another possible reason could be psychotic depression. At this point, the person could be having exhibiting traits of loss of reality, like they may be suffering from schizophrenia or psychotic distorted thoughts. And such distorted thoughts, like in the mind of the woman, in this case now, her distorted thoughts would lead her to thinking that the act she's about to perpetrate on her kids, it's an act of mercy, not an act of hate.
Just like she thinks that she's trying to protect herself and the children from pain.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, and she feels it's an act of love, it's an act of favor, because that's how the distorted thinking leads her to, And most often the children, they tend to be victims and all that. So this is another possible cause. Another thing we can talk about is postpartum depression. Many women who put to birth, some women who put to birth their child or children tend to develop postpartum depression. Another possible cause could be a psychological phenomenon which is called extended or family annihilation, extended suicide, same as having their distorted thinking. There's a shift in perspective from the normal to a very, very dark phase. Right, so they feel like if I die, my children will suffer if they are left behind. So those are possible causes of what could have led to this felicite suicide.
People now seem to be very glued to their phones. Social media has now become one of the places where we get ourselves entertained. Do you think social media can have an impact on someone's mental health?
Thank you so much, Immaculate, for the question. Definitely. Well, I think social media has both positive and negative impact.
Yeah.
So I will talk first of all on the negative impact. You have the effect of competition and low self-esteem. Most, especially this is attributed to a lot of adolescents. They would want to emulate the lifestyle. I always like telling people that what you watch on social media, always take it with a pinch of salt, because most of the lifestyles that are being flaunted on social media, they're not real. So most of them, they want to emulate, they want to become like them, and they tend to
influencers selling us a good image of how their lives look like. Best marriages.
So it leads to low self-esteem. You have a body image as well. Some teenagers also, they tend to develop this body dysmorphic disorders because they want to look like celebrities. They want to have a tiny waist like Kim Kardashian.
Hourglass
Some of them will want to tie, I don't know whether they call it waist trainers or whatever. They will wrap this waist trainer, and their waist to just look like, I don't know what to describe. So that is it. So with this, that's a negative effect as well. And you have addiction. Yes. A lot of people get addicted to their phones. And it leads to loss of sleep or loss of focus and stuff like that. Many at times, most of the people who they are addicted to their phones, especially those students going to school, it's a call for concern, because they tend not to concentrate with their academics and things like that. And then for the positive impact, it's like a forum for advocacy. A lot of talk on mental health is going on, and so many people are learning on social media globally. And in Cameroon is not different. So many people are hearing about talk on mental health, and it helps them to to learn how to take care of their mental health.
Finally, we have finally come to the end of today's program. Thank you so much, Nurse BERINYUY Irene. It's been a pleasure being with you.
You're welcome. Thank you
Equally,
so much.
Big thanks to our technicians over there. We had Louis Pego and we had Jonathan Babula. Thank you so much. And thank you to all our dear listeners and viewers of Equinoxe Television. Have a wonderful day in the company of more interesting programs on the best of TV and radio station. Bye-bye for now.